Okay, everyone. Welcome to another episode of College and Career Pathways, where every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 p.m., we provide you with information on various colleges and universities, financial aid resources, training programs, skilled trade professions, and career readiness skills, all designed to help you make the best career decisions possible. I'm Toni Cureton, your host, and today we are with MI Student Aid, the Department of Treasury, and they're going to be talking about um, FAFSA and scholarships and state aid 101, any and everything that you want to know about it. And this is our last financial aid workshop for the school year. So thank you, Emily. We are so glad to have you back, and take it away.
Thank you so much. Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As Ms. Cureton mentioned, my name is Emily. I'm here on behalf of my student aid. So we're within the Michigan Department of Treasury, and we're actually the part of Treasury that administers or gives out some of the scholarships and grants here through the state of Michigan. So we definitely want to take the time today to share some information about our state financial aid programs, also share some information with you just about financial aid in general. So helping you to kind of understand where you can access some of that free money to help you pay for college, some kind of best practices for if you're taking out student loans, and then also giving you some information just as you're comparing different institutions that you might be considering. So my colleague, Kristen Hooper, she's here today. She's going to be kind of behind the scenes, just here if we've got any additional questions, and just kind of observing. So we'll go ahead and just get this kicked off right away. So again, just going to talk through some of the different things that go into financial aid. So we could talk about financial aid for a very long time, but today our goal is really just to give you some of those quick things, give you kind of a big overall picture of financial aid. And again, just help you kind of identify some of those different sources and some of those different types of financial aid that can help you pay for school. So, diving right in, let's talk about some of the different institutions that you might be considering. So, I'm going to put up our three different institutional types. So, first we have our community colleges, followed by our public colleges and universities, and then our third option are our private colleges and universities. So the first line or the first bullet that you'll see across these three different options is you'll see the average COA. So COA stands for cost of attendance. And so this is for an entire academic year. So on average for our community colleges here in the state, the cost of attendance is right around $18,830. And we know that at these schools, they're going to offer a lot of your 2-year programs. So anyone that's joining us today that's thinking about maybe some associate degrees, or maybe you're thinking about some certificate programs, you're probably going to be looking at your local community college. And I just learned today that Macomb Community College has their new Macomb tuition advantage. I learned about that. So some of you may want to look at Macomb and look to see, what are some of the programs that they can offer there, as well as other community colleges throughout the state. Look and see what they might have available for those 2-year or certificate programs that are typically a year or less. That second option, those public colleges or universities, you'll notice that COA, that cost of attendance, does go up for these schools. But at these schools, they're offering usually a lot of 4-year degree programs, so a lot of bachelor's degrees. But some of these schools may also offer some associate degrees. For instance, Ferris State University, they offer not only 4-year degrees or bachelor's degrees, but they also offer a lot of 2-year or associate degree programs. That third option are private colleges or universities here in the state. Again, you'll notice that cost of attendance is going up a little bit more. They're going to offer a lot of the same things as option two as our public colleges and universities, but often these schools are a little bit more expensive when it comes to cost of attendance. But what I would tell you, and what I tell all students, is if you're looking at option three, if maybe you're looking at a private college or university here in the state, I would just tell you, don't let that sticker cost prevent you from applying to that school. So if you're looking at that cost of attendance and you're thinking, oh geez, that's a pretty, high cost. I don't know if I can afford that. I would still encourage you to apply, because that college or university is going to let you know what they can do for you in terms of financial aid. And sometimes these private colleges and universities can really offer a very generous financial aid package for students. So we'll talk about this a little later, but this is why FAFSA is going to be so important, because you really want to see and you want to be considered for as much financial aid as possible to help reduce your cost of attendance at all of these different institution types. Another thing I would mention too is keep in mind that there are decisions that you can make to help reduce the cost of attendance. For instance, maybe you're at a school where they're offering meal plans to students, where you could sign up for 3 meals a day, 4 meals a day in their dining halls. Some students elect to not have a meal plan and instead to buy groceries on their own. And so they think, I can do a better job budgeting. I can save some money if I don't go with that meal plan. Also, I was a commuter student, so I lived at home and I commuted to campus. And even though it might not have been the coolest because I didn't have my own apartment, but I saved a lot of money just in that commute that I took to and from school. All right, so let's talk through the different types of financial aid. So the first type is free money. So hopefully I got your attention with free money. So these are things like scholarships and grants. So if you're wondering, what's the big difference between scholarships and grants? Scholarships tend to be merit-based, meaning they want to see maybe a particular accomplishment, maybe it's tied to a piece of your identity. I'm sure many of you have heard of scholarships for students who are left-handed. Also scholarships for students who are maybe a part of their National Honor Society, or have maybe taken a leadership role on one of their school organizations, or maybe in athletics. So scholarships can be very wide ranging. Grants tend to be need-based. So what we mean by need-based is we want to know, or we want to see, does the student demonstrate financial need? So oftentimes students say, well, how do I do that? How do I show my financial need? And the way that you do that is by completing the FAFSA. So this is why FAFSA is so important. You want to make sure that you get it done, because then you're considered for things like grants that are out there that are based on a student's financial need. Now, there's also a type of financial aid called earned money. So this is something called work study. So I don't know if any of you have heard of federal work study, but we'll talk a little bit more about this in just a little bit in the presentation. But this is essentially part-time employment on a college campus to help with college expenses. So it's a form of financial aid, again, awarded to students who demonstrate financial need. So if you want to be considered for something like federal work study, it's important and it's imperative that you get that FAFSA in so that you can be considered for federal work study. And we'll talk a little bit more about work study later on. And then the last type of financial aid is borrowed money or loans. So I really hope for all of you that you don't have to take out any loans. But if you do find yourself in the position that you do have to take out some loans, I want to be able to share just some important tips and tricks and things to consider when you are taking out student loans. And keep in mind that some student loans do have to be repaid with interest. So that means you might take out a $2,000 loan, but at the end with interest, it might end up being like $2,100, right? Because that loan's going to accumulate interest while you're in school. So I'll give you some tips in a little while about things that you should do if you do have to take out loans. So those were the different types of financial aid. Now let's talk through the different sources of financial aid. So where can you find this money? So the first source is the federal government. So the federal government is going to have grants. Remember, we talked about those just a minute ago, those need-based grants. The federal government's going to have some of that. They're going to have some scholarships as well. You also have the state government. So I'm here on behalf of the state of Michigan, and we have scholarships and grants for students here in the state of Michigan. So I'll share information a little later about our state financial aid programs. Then you also have the institutions themselves. So all the different colleges and universities that you might be thinking of attending, they are going to also have scholarships and grants at their school to help you pay for school. And then the last source are our private or third party sources. So think of this like local associations, foundations, could be churches, maybe a union, or it could even be the employer of your parent. I know my colleague always shares that her step parent worked, for their employer, and she had never heard anything about scholarships or anything. But my colleague asked, she just said, hey, can you find out, do you have any type of scholarships through your work? And her stepmom asked, and they found out that yes, their employer did indeed have a scholarship for the children of their employees. So it just sometimes isn't something that's maybe widely advertised, but it helps sometimes just to ask and find out. And I know I always share that when I was a senior, we had a local foundation here that was giving out scholarships, and all you had to do was fill out an application, share some information about yourself, and just doing those simple things, I was able to get $1,000 scholarship to help pay for school. So sometimes it could be as simple as just completing that application, and boom, you've got some free money to help with school. So you heard me talking about FAFSA. I was sprinkling it in here and there, but FAFSA is really going to be your key to being considered for any of those different types of financial aid that I talked about earlier. So things like scholarships, grants, work study, even loans. You need to have a FAFSA in so that you can be considered for those different types of financial aid. And I always tell students, think of FAFSA as like your first step to unlocking any of that financial aid that's there. If you don't do a FAFSA, sometimes those colleges and universities, they're like, oh, okay, no problem. Emily's got it. Like she didn't do a FAFSA. I guess she'll just pay out of pocket. And if you're thinking, well, I don't have thousands of dollars to, pay for school, then you definitely want to get a FAFSA in again, so that you can be considered for as much financial aid as possible. So the first step in the FAFSA is registering your FSA ID. So you'll notice we've got the website right there at the top of your screen where you can go to create that FSA ID and password. And you'll notice I just put a couple key things up on the screen for you about that process. So it is required for both the student and at least one parent or guardian if they're submitting that FAFSA online. So the student will have their own separate FSA ID and password. Their parent, if you do need parent information, students, your parent will have a separate FSA ID and password for their piece of the FAFSA. Now, the FSA ID is linked to your social security number. So it's important that, again, you're each creating your own, students and parents, and that you'll be asked, some security questions, some lockout questions, just to make sure, that everything can be kept secure. But definitely keep this FSA ID and password in a safe and secure place, because every year that you're enrolled in college, you're going to do a FAFSA. So you're going to use the same FSA ID and password to log in each year. And students, if you're wondering, why do I do a FAFSA every year? Why isn't it just kind of a one and done? And the reason is, things can change, right? Financially, things can change. Within the family structure, things could change. So they want you to do it every year so that they have a good understanding of where things are at and that current kind of status financially and otherwise for the family. So keep in mind that if you don't have a social security number, the user won't be able to create an FSA ID. Parents, however, can sign a signature page. So if parents don't have a social security number, that's okay. They can enter all zeros. And what's going to happen is they're going to physically print that last signature page. They're going to sign it, and then they're going to mail it in. So it is possible, students, if your parents, do not have a social security number, they can still complete that FAFSA and sign that FAFSA. All right, so starting the FAFSA, I wanted to just show you kind of that screenshot right up there of kind of what it looks like. You all will go to that Start Here button, and that's when they're going to ask, are you the student? Are you the parent? And that's what's going to prompt kind of the next steps in that process. And again, that first step is always creating that FSA ID and password. That way, the student has the ability to complete the FAFSA, sign everything electronically, while also saving and coming back. All right. And keep in mind, there's going to be deadlines also within the state of Michigan in terms of FAFSA completion. So I want to be real clear for anyone who's joining today that maybe hasn't done a FAFSA yet. You still have time. So I met with seniors last week, and there was a handful that said to me, oh, well, I know I'm eligible for TIP, but I missed the FAFSA deadline. So you have not missed the FAFSA deadline. We have 2 state of Michigan programs that have a May 1st FAFSA deadline, and that's our Michigan Competitive Scholarship and our Michigan Tuition Grant. But for all other state financial aid programs, students, you still have time to do that FAFSA. So I would say if you're considering going to school, enrolling, maybe anytime next year, you definitely want to get that FAFSA in, and you still have time. So wanted to share just some contact information for the federal government, because they are the ones that administer the FAFSA. So if you're working through the FAFSA, you have questions along the way, these are good numbers to call. So you'll notice that 1-800-4FED number up on your screen, but then they're also on a variety of social media too. And their website, the federal website, is very helpful. So they've got a lot of guides, a lot of FAQs, but I wanted to make sure that you knew these contact numbers. All right, so let's talk just some quick FAFSA facts. So FAFSA can be completed online, and most people do it right on their computer. So if you're looking for the quickest way to do your FAFSA, we recommend go ahead and complete that online. FAFSA is always free. FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So students, you don't ever pay to complete the FAFSA. It's totally free. If you are on a website that's prompting you to pay some amount of money, I would just say you're on a scam site. Definitely X out of that. Don't share any more information. FAFSA is always free. I would recommend too that you're always on a safe and secure network when you are completing the FAFSA, because you're going to put some information in, right? Like date of birth, your social security number, and other things. So just want to make sure you're doing it on a safe and secure network. FAFSA in general for a student and a parent, if the student needs parent information, usually takes about an hour and a half to complete. So this isn't like an all day thing, an all week thing. Students, you have to just be able to carve out some time to answer some of these questions. And along the way, as you're answering those questions, FAFSA is going to ask some things about your parents, marital status, things like that. And they're just trying to determine if they need parent information for your FAFSA. So students just go along, answer those questions truthfully, and then FAFSA will let you know if they do need parent information. So you'll notice FAFSA has been open for our seniors since October 1st of 2022. Now, important to note for anyone who might be joining that's maybe a junior, know that next year, so FAFSA that will be for 24-25, for our class of 2024 students, they're anticipating that there's going to be a little bit of a delay in that FAFSA release. And that's because they're doing a lot of updates to the FAFSA. So knock on wood, trying to make it even more smooth for students and families to complete. But I would just say, keep in mind that FAFSA next year isn't going to open probably until December. So for any seniors, again, that are joining us right now that are still thinking about enrolling in college next year, FAFSA is open for you. So you still have time, go ahead and complete that. And for any juniors, just know that next year that FAFSA open, when it's going to release for you or open for you, looks like it's going to be December of 2023. Now, they have been making improvements to the FAFSA, including improvements to the IRS data retrieval tool. So students, if you do have that option to use the data retrieval tool, I highly recommend that you do. It just assists in pulling that information from the taxes over into the FAFSA. So it really helps kind of eliminate errors that often can just happen on accident from users. So you've done your FAFSA, it gets sent to the federal government, they go ahead and they process that FAFSA, and then you'll receive what's called your EFC. Now, I don't know if any of you have heard of this, but the EFC stands for Expected Family Contribution. So this is always in the form of a number. And basically, the federal government uses all of that information that you answered in the FAFSA, and they use that information to determine and come, up with what your EFC is. So again, always in the form of a number. A student could have a 0 EFC, a student could have a 10,000 EFC, a 20,000 EFC, but that EFC number is used to determine what types of financial aid the student is eligible for. So it's important for you to know EFC is not the amount that you and your family are expected or need to pay upfront. So oftentimes students get a little uneasy about this sometimes when they see their EFC. Like I had a student reach out to me, he got his EFC and it was like 14,000, and he said, Emily, I got my EFC, it's 14,000. My family can't pay 14,000 out of pocket. If this is what we're expected to pay, we don't have this. And I told him, this was back in the fall, but I told him, I said, just wait. You're going to keep applying to your schools, right? And then you're going to start getting your award letters or your award offers, right? And so I told him, wait to see those award letters or those offers from those different colleges and universities, because that's really going to show you what that college or university can do for you. So, for instance, like for me, I applied to 5 different schools when I was a senior. I was accepted to all 5. 2 were out of state, 3 were in state, but I wanted to see the award letters from each of those schools because I wanted to compare and see what could each school do for me, who was able to give me the most financial aid. So I would just tell you, don't let your EFC number scare you. Just know this is my EFC and wait to get those award letters or those award offers so you can look a little deeper and see what that college or university can do for you. So there are a lot of variables that impact EFC. So of course, income is up there, right? They're going to look at the income of students. If you were working, they're going to look at your income. If you need parent information, they're going to also ask for income information for your parent, but they also want to know about your family size. Do you have maybe older brothers and sisters that are in college? And they're going to want to know things like amount paid in taxes. So there's a lot of variables that go into figuring out a student's EFC, not just solely income. So there is something called an independent student. So I know some of you have heard me talking about if you need parent information for your FAFSA. So there are some students who, based on their particular circumstances, they do not need parent information. So I'm going to put up some of these circumstances that a student might be experiencing, or situations that the student might be in that classifies them as an independent student. So you'll notice the student being at least 24 years old or older, the student being married, if the student has children or dependents of their own, also students who've experienced time in foster care. So any of you that might have experienced time in foster care, if you had an open case at the age of 13 or older, and they will ask this question on the FAFSA, if they're asking that, if you had an open foster care case, or if at any time you were a ward of the court, definitely check that box, yes. This isn't to be all in your business and try to know everything, that you've experienced, but more it's trying to figure out, again, do we need parent information, or is this student considered an independent student? And if you are considered independent, you're often going to qualify for the most amount of financial aid possible. Almost all independent students have a 0 EFC. So they're, again, eligible for a lot of financial aid opportunities, but you do have to fall into one of these categories. So again, experiencing time in foster care, an emancipated minor, a student who may be homeless or at risk of homelessness. These are all reasons that a student, again, may be considered independent. Now, I will say that the list that's on your screen, this is not all inclusive. So this doesn't show every single student circumstance that might qualify or classify them as an independent student. I always give the example of a young man that I was working with when I was at U of M, and he had shared what he was experiencing within his family, that although on paper it looked like his parents did really well financially and they were making good money in their jobs, he shared with us that he had a parent that was struggling with a gambling addiction. And so although it looked like they had a lot of money coming in through their jobs, he was sharing that a lot of that money was being lost to this gambling addiction. And so basically after our conversation, I encouraged him to talk to the financial aid office at the school, which is what he did. And they shared with him their steps and what they call a professional judgment. And so they gave him those steps. They asked for documentation from him. He provided the documentation they requested. And so they were able to change his dependency. So he flipped from a dependent student that needed parent information to an independent student. And sometimes there are cases where maybe dependency isn't changed, but maybe the financial aid office is able to adjust a student's financial aid package depending on, what might be happening again within the family. So I would just really encourage all of you to advocate for yourselves. If you are experiencing something, definitely share that with the financial aid office at the college or university that you're thinking of attending or planning on attending, because they're the ones who are going to be able to make that determination and potentially, make that change in judgment. All right. So if you do need parent information and you're wondering, well, maybe my parents, have divorced, whose information do I include on the FAFSA? This chart that's up on your screen is there to kind of help you. So you'll notice that based on the left-hand side, that's giving you the parent's marital status. And then on the right-hand side, it's giving you that FAFSA action. So it's letting you know what parent info you're going to need. So if your parents are married to each other, you'll notice you'll need both parents' information on the FAFSA. If your parents are legally separated or divorced, you'll notice we're saying use custodial parents' information. And what we mean by that is use the parent that you reside with, your custodial parent, we want you to use their information. So definitely feel free, take a picture of this if you'd like, jot down maybe what FAFSA action you'll need to take based on your parents' marital status. But we hope this chart will just help you and guide you. If you have more questions about it though, I would definitely say check out that the federal FAFSA website, because they've got a lot of FAQs, a lot of frequently asked questions about parents' marital status on the FAFSA. So remember, we talked about advocating to that financial aid office. And I mentioned that, that financial aid office could make what we call a professional judgment for that student. So students with special circumstances, they may be eligible for that professional judgment, but the only way you know is if you reach out to that financial aid office and you're able to have a conversation with them about your particular circumstance. So again, that could allow a special circumstance, could allow a student's financial aid package to be reevaluated. It could even allow that dependency, like I said, to switch. But again, the students got to advocate and they have to inquire with that school's financial aid office. So there are a lot of special circumstances. Some might have to do with a change in income or household size. I would say this is probably the most common. And certainly we saw a lot of this after COVID, right? So a lot of families were having some changes, right? There might have been a loss in a job. Maybe you went from 2 incomes to 1. So that could classify as that special circumstances. So an opportunity to, again, talk to the financial aid office about what might be going on within the family. Dependency overrides could happen, due to things like abuse or neglect, or again, people without housing or at risk of homelessness. And there are, of course, other circumstances like the example I gave earlier, but that's gonna require some documentation along the way. All right. So remember when we talked about those different sources of financial aid? So where you could find some of that different money to help pay for school. So that first source that we talked about was the federal government. So I'm going to put up on the screen some of the different grants that are available through the federal government, as well as things like loans you'll notice at the bottom. So the federal Pell Grant that's listed first, this is the largest grant that's available through the federal government. And we'll talk more about this in a minute. But again, if you want to be considered for any of these programs that are listed on your screen, you have to get that FAFSA in. FAFSA is going to be required for you to be considered for any of these things. So you'll notice there's a couple grants up there that are specifically for students looking to go into education. So any of you that might be thinking about that path, definitely check out the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant and also the Education Assistance for Higher Education Grant. And then, like I mentioned, the last bullet point is all on loans, right? So there are loans available through the federal government. There are subsidized and unsubsidized loans, as well as what we call a federal direct plus, or sometimes called a parent plus loan. So important to know that federal grant aid often does not need to be repaid, but federal loans need to be repaid. So loans always have to be repaid. And I will say, I know you heard me mention for the federal grant aid that I said often does not, but important to keep in mind that for some of these grants, for instance, like some of these education or these teaching related grants, they'll have a requirement as part of that grant. And I believe it's something like you have to agree to teach for a certain amount of years in a high needs under-resourced kind of area, and you've got to agree to do that for a certain amount of time. So I know that there are some instances where students do not fulfill that requirement of that grant, and that grant can turn into a loan. So I just want to say, keep that in mind, students. Make sure you're paying attention to if it's very specific, if it's a grant that's very specific in terms of what the requirement is on your end to receive that money, just make sure you're paying attention because we'd hate for that free money to then turn into a loan at the end of the day. So let's talk through the federal Pell Grant. So again, to complete or to be considered for Pell, you got to complete that FAFSA. You're probably going to, at the end of this, be saying, I've heard FAFSA way too many times. So you're going to hear it a lot coming up. So families that are making less than $27,000 a year, they're going to automatically receive a 0 EFC. Remember that expected family contribution. And so that means for those students, those college-bound students, they're going to be eligible for the maximum amount of Pell funding. So for students this year that are enrolled in college that are Pell eligible, the maximum amount of Pell was $6,895. So I would say students, just think about that for a minute. Remember, this is just one program. This is the federal Pell Grant, just one program that could potentially, if you're eligible, pay out $6,895. But imagine if you're eligible for other things, like what was it, the new Macomb Tuition Advantage, right? Where they're going to cover your tuition at Macomb Community College. Say you're also eligible, you're getting that. Then you're also getting Pell. I mean, that's just really helping to reduce your cost of attendance, right, at that particular school. So again, this is why FAFSA is so important, because we don't want you to miss out on any free money that you might be eligible for. So there's also federal work study available, again, through the federal government. So remember, we talked about this a little bit earlier, and I mentioned this is part-time employment on a college campus to help with college expenses. So again, this is awarded to students that demonstrate financial need at their school. So how do you demonstrate financial need? You have to complete the FAFSA, right, in order to be considered. So important to note, this does not, just because you're eligible for federal work study, does not guarantee you're going to have on-campus employment. You're going to have a job set up for you, reserved, ready to go. What it does mean is that, hey, there's a list of all the work study jobs on campus, and you are eligible to receive work study. So what that means for you is you're probably still going to go, you're probably going to have a regular interview, right? You're going to sit down with that person that's doing the interviewing. You could get a job in the rec center on campus, the dining hall on campus. I've seen students also have work study jobs where they're working maybe the front desk in the psychology department or the dean of students office. So for you, you're going to interview, and then if you get that job, that award amount is going to be used to help fund wages earned by you as a student employee. So what that what that looks like is this: you're going to see in your award package or your award offer, you're going to see federal work study listed, just like you'll see other scholarships and other grants listed, and there'll be an award amount next to that. But then as you're working, you're doing your regular weekly work, you're going to get a regular paycheck. And so just like a student who wasn't in a work study job, you're going to get that regular paycheck. And basically the government says, we hope you're going to use that money to help pay for your college expenses. So it could be any of the things that I listed up on your screen. It could be, if you've got remaining tuition that needs to be paid, fees, or other campus charges. Maybe you're want to use some of that money to pay towards your housing or other room and board expenses, books and materials, personal needs, transportation. So you could use it for any of these things. But at the end of the day, the government basically says it's up to you. So your decision. I've seen some students, again, use their work study jobs to pay for anything, from tuition to housing. I've also seen them just save their money and use it towards groceries or to have spending money, right, when they want to go out on the weekends. So really up to you, but I would encourage you, if you're, as you're working your way through the FAFSA, there is going to be a question about whether or not you want to be considered for federal work study. And I can't tell you how many students I meet with that tell me, I didn't know what that was, so I just checked no. And I would just say, please, please, please check that box. Yes. All you're saying is that you want to be considered for work study. So if you do find out you're eligible for that, why not get, some job experience, right? Be able to work that part-time job on campus, get that work experience, while also earning some extra money. And I would say too, we say part-time employment. Sometimes students immediately think 20 hours a week, right? I've seen students do work study jobs and work 6 hours a week or 8 hours a week. So the nice thing is they're going to work around your schedule. They know you're a student on their campus. So again, just an opportunity to get some work experience and also earn some extra money to help pay for school. All right. So that was work study. Now let's talk through federal loans. So loans are, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, super boring. And I'm sure for many of you, you're like, well, I don't have a ton of experience with loans. I don't know a lot about these different terms, right? So I just want to share a couple key things about loans. So you'll notice that through the federal government, you're going to have things like subsidized versus unsubsidized loans. When you get a financial aid award or a package from your school, if you have any unmet need, so if you have any money that's there, any balance that's there that your scholarships and grants and work study couldn't cover, that school is going to offer you some loans. So they're going to say, you're eligible for this amount in an unsubsidized loan, or you're eligible for this amount in a subsidized loan. So what I want you to know, and it's on your screen and it's bolded, these are the main differences between these two loan types. So in a subsidized loan, the government is going to pay that interest. So while you're still in school, while you're taking classes, the government's going to handle any interest that accumulates or builds on that loan. In an unsubsidized loan, you as the student, you're responsible for that loan the minute you take it out. So that means I might still be taking classes. I haven't graduated yet from college, but I took out a $2,000 loan that's unsubsidized. That means the minute I take it out, it's going to start accumulating interest. It's going to start building. So students, I would tell you, if you get offered both a subsidized loan and an unsubsidized loan to help cover any balance you have, I would always recommend go with that subsidized loan first. Let the government pay the interest on that loan, save yourself some extra money. And then last, you do have something called a plus loan, or it's often called a parent plus loan. The big difference here is that this loan is in the parent's name. So the parent is the loan holder. They're responsible for, ensuring that that loan gets paid back. And so for many students, I always say my parents were like, sorry, Emily, we're not going to co-sign on anything with you. If you take out loans, it's all on you. But if your parent is open to this, or you at least want to explore it, definitely worth exploring if that is something that's offered to you at your college or university. All right. So just some quick things to consider when you are taking out a loan. I'm just going to put a couple up on the screen. One big one I would say, students, is just thinking about your total loan debt. So starting to think about like, how much might I take out if I'm getting a 4-year degree? How much might I take out in loans over those 4 years? And is that amount gonna be lower than what I'm projected to make in my first year post graduation? So if I know, in other words, if I know I'm gonna make about 45,000 in my first year post graduation, I want to make sure that I'm taking out less than that in loans. Because what if I took out like 60,000 in loans and I'm only making 45,000, right? That's going to just be a hard hole for me to crawl out of. So if I'm being smart about the amount of loans that I'm borrowing and I'm aware of what I'm going to make in that first year, that's just going to be helpful for me to tackle that loan, right? So just knowing, what are you going to make in that first year? What's that estimate? And then where are your loan totals at? And then another thing I would say, and I always share this with students, is that, when you're looking at loans, you're going to have private loan companies offer you loans, and then you're going to have loans available to you through the federal government. I always tell students, take out those federal loans first. They tend to have better repayment options. They tend to have better interest rates. And then you see on your screen things like loan repayment, the loan forgiveness options. When I was in college, I was a lifeguard and I taught swim lessons. When I graduated from college and I had my degree, it took me about 11 months to find a job in my career. And so after 6 months, those loan companies were saying, hey, it's time to start paying. And I wasn't making a ton of money, but because I had loans through the federal government, I was able to apply for something called an income-based repayment plan, or an income-driven loan repayment plan. And so I just shared my pay stub. They were able to see what I made as a lifeguard, and they adjusted my loan payment. So my loan went from like over $200 a month to like $25 a month. So much more manageable. And I was able to do that because I had loans through the federal government. So just something to keep in mind about, just those loan repayment opportunities and options. All right. So that was the federal government. Remember, our next source of financial aid is the state government. So that's me. I'm here on behalf of the state of Michigan. So I'm going to put up on your screen, this is a listing of some of our state financial aid programs. So some of the scholarships and grants that we provide through the state of Michigan. And I would say definitely take a look. I'm going to have our website up on the screen for you as well, so that you can see more information on these various programs. But a lot of our programs may have to do with a particular experience that student has had. Others have to do with SAT score, or whether or not you're looking at a private school or college or university here in the state. And then others may have to do with things like Medicaid, if you were ever on Medicaid or receiving Medicaid here in the state, or our new Michigan Achievement Scholarship, which has to do with the student's EFC. So we're going to talk through some of these right now. So you'll notice eligibility for all of our state financial aid programs that I just had up on your screen. They all require Michigan residency, U.S. citizenship, permanent residency, or approved refugee status. And they all require that free application for federal student aid. So again, students, if you want to be considered for any financial aid through the state of Michigan, you got to get that FAFSA in. And then you'll notice additional things like being enrolled at least half time, having a high school diploma, certificate of achievement, or its recognized equivalent, and then just making sure you're meeting what's called satisfactory academic progress, or SAP. So students, I would just recommend look at the college or university that you're considering attending. They'll have their SAP requirements listed on their website so that you have an idea of what that looks like at that school. All right. So some other things, just important things when it comes to FAFSA. Remember earlier, there's two state of Michigan financial aid programs, the Michigan Competitive Scholarship and the Michigan Tuition Grant. Those each had a May 1st FAFSA deadline. However, all of our other state financial aid programs do not have a FAFSA deadline. It's really just the federal FAFSA deadline. So again, students, you still have time. You basically have a full year to complete that FAFSA. So if you're considering enrolling for next school year, you're thinking about enrolling at your local community college or a 4-year public or private, definitely get that FAFSA in. You still have time. And then important to mention, students, for any of our state financial aid, FAFSA college order is important. So that means we always look at that first school you listed on your FAFSA. So you can list up to 10 colleges and universities you're interested in attending. We always look at your top school. So if that's changed, maybe you initially had Eastern Michigan University, now it's going to be Washtenaw Community College. No worries, you can always just update your FAFSA. So log back in and rearrange your schools. Or you can go into your MySSG student portal account if you created one, and you can just update it there. Or you can contact our customer care team at the number on your screen, and we'll update it right over the phone. And that's the quickest way. So if you need to update it, I would always say call our customer care number. That's the quickest way to get those updates in. So I did want to talk about one of our programs in particular, and that's the new Michigan Achievement Scholarship. So again, students, FAFSA is required because they're looking at EFC. So for any student who completes that FAFSA, you're going to be automatically considered for the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. And if you have an EFC, or that expected family contribution of $25,000 or less, you automatically qualify for the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. So again, just another reason to get that FAFSA in, because you may be eligible for this scholarship already. So you'll notice at our community colleges or our tribal colleges, up to $2,750 per year. That's renewable for up to 3 years. At our public schools, up to $5,500, renewable for up to 5. And at our private or independent schools, up to 4,000 per year, again, renewable for up to 5. So students can use the Michigan Achievement Scholarship for up to 5 consecutive years. So for any students that might be thinking about a transfer option, maybe you're going to start at your local community college. You do 2 years at your local community college. You still have 3 years of Michigan Achievement Scholarship eligibility remaining if you decide to go on, maybe to a public or a private college or university here in the state. So they anticipate that 8 out of 10 students will be eligible for this scholarship. So those odds are really in your favor, right, students? So we want to make sure that you get your FAFSA in and you're considered for the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. So we also have a program called the Tuition Incentive Program, or TIP. So this is a program for students who either have or previously had Michigan Medicaid coverage for at least 24 months within a 36-month period. So in other words, for at least 2 years within a 3-year period. And we're tracking starting at age 9 all the way to high school graduation. So students, you may be eligible for this as well. We anticipate, or it's estimated, that nearly half of our senior class here in the state of Michigan is eligible for TIP. So there's no special application needed. You just have to make sure you're completing high school before you turn age 20. So that's an important piece. And another nice thing about TIP is the third bullet, which says you have 4 years from the time you graduate from high school to start using TIP. So for any of you that might be thinking, well, I know I'm eligible for TIP, but I don't have my plan in place just yet, know that you've got that 4-year window to start using TIP. So once the student receives their first TIP payment, they have 10 years before their remaining benefits expire. So if you're wondering a little bit about TIP, I'm sorry, I'm going to kind of breeze through this, but I want to show you, if you're wondering, am I eligible for TIP? So there's a couple ways that you can find out. You can create what's called a MySSG student portal account. So we have the QR code that's down in your screen, in the bottom corner of your screen, but that will take you right to where you can create a portal. And the important thing is you need your social security number. So if you know your SOC and you either have a FAFSA on file or you have a TIP record, you're going to be able to create that student portal account. And if you're eligible for TIP, you're going to get a message that pops up on your screen that says you're eligible for the tuition incentive program. And it's going to give you kind of a link to go and complete some more information. But TIP money can be used towards a certificate, at least 1-year certificate, a 2-year degree or an associate degree, or even towards a bachelor's degree. So students, if you've got more questions about TIP, definitely check out our website. It's going to show you a listing of all of the participating colleges and universities here in the state of Michigan that accept TIP. So definitely take a look. That'll show you more about those different schools in the state. All right. So I know we're winding down. So there's a lot of things you can do in the system, everything from completing applications for our programs to updating your college or university that you plan on attending, to viewing eligibility status, payment status, all that good stuff. Now, if you haven't checked out our website, I did just want to show you real quick. We have our students and families tab that's circled in red up in the corner, but that's where you can find a lot of helpful information. So publications, fact sheets on all of our programs. So Michigan Achievement, the Tuition Incentive Program, Fostering Futures. You'll see a listing of all of our state financial aid programs and fact sheets for each of those programs. There's also something called our My Scholarship search tool. So I don't know if any of you have ever used this, but the QR code in the corner of your screen, that will take you directly to our My Scholarship search. But you'll notice that red arrow, that's pointing to a drop-down menu where you have the ability to filter by county. So you can filter filter by the county in which you live, and then that's going to pull in all of your local community-based scholarships that are right there again in your own community, in your own backyard. So again, if you're looking for more free money, this might be another helpful tool. I know that a lot of scholarships are starting to wind down this time of year, but it doesn't hurt, right, to look for some more free money. So I wanted to end with you all being able to see some of our information. So this is our customer care number that's on the screen, 1-888-447-2687. You'll also see our website where, again, you can go to find even more information on all state financial aid, and then our email. So you can email us directly if you've got any questions about any state aid, or if you have questions about your eligibility for any of our programs. But I would definitely just say, or I would end with, if you haven't done a FAFSA, get that FAFSA in. The state of Michigan has a lot of financial aid that they want to give you. There's a lot of free money out there. And now learning about Macomb Community College, there's a lot of colleges and universities that are getting on board that have money to support you and want to see you be successful. So don't hesitate to reach out. But thanks so much for having me again.
Thank you so much, Emily. Excellent presentation as always. Before we wrap this up, I would like to ask everyone, do you have any questions for Emily? All righty, then we will wrap this up. Again, thank you guys for joining. Thank you so much, Emily, and we'll see you all next time. Everybody have a great day.